that even robots can have hopes and dreams. When the Planet Express crew learns that Bender finds joy in the act of cooking, despite his robot body lacking the ability to taste, he is given the new job of the ship's cook. However, that same lack of taste leads to problems. When preparing his first meal, he uses far too much salt, creating an overall unpleasant experience. Soon after, Fry staggers through the desert of the planet Trisol to make a delivery. The heat of the planet's 3 suns, combined with the massive amount of salt he just consumed, drive him to the point of desperation. When he arrives at the Trisolian Royal Palace, he finds what appears to be a bottle of water on the armrest of an empty throne, and is unable to resist guzzling it down. Suddenly, he finds himself held at spear point by the Trisolian Royal Guard. The Trisolians are beings made of water, and the liquid he just consumed was Emperor Bont himself. But then, in a stroke of great fortune, the Trisolians all bow before Fry. As it turns out, the Trisolian royal line of succession is based on assassination, and so, by drinking the previous emperor, Fry has now inherited the title. As the coronation approaches, Fry and Leela begin arguing, Leela admonishing Fry for his recklessness. She soon learns that many Trisolian emperors were assassinated at their own coronations, and with Fry's approaching, he is in terrible danger. But when she attempts to warn him, he refuses to listen, causing her to storm off back to the ship, swearing that she will offer no further help to him. At the coronation, as Fry is crowned and all the suns have set, the Trisolians begin to glow. And so does Fry's stomach. Miraculously, Emperor Bont survived being drunk and is still alive within Fry. The Trisolians attack, intent on tearing Fry apart to free their emperor. The Planet Express crew retreats, barring themselves in the throne room, where they concoct a plan to make Fry cry, releasing the Emperor through his tear ducts, and negating the need to kill Fry. However, he finds himself unable to cry despite everyone's effort to do so. But then, Leela arrives on the scene. Fighting her way through the mob of Trisolians outside, Bender relays the events of the fight to Fry. But alas, they capture, and soon, Leela is dead. Distraught, Fry begins to cry, mourning the death of his friend and regretting how he had treated her. But the deception is revealed as Leela enters the throne room. Bender had lied in an attempt to force Fry to cry out the Emperor, but his plan was cut off prematurely. Fortunately, Leela has another idea, and they all begin to beat up Fry, his tears of pain setting Emperor Bont free. Fry has made it out of his ordeal alive, and with a new appreciation for Leela. Welcome to Space Podcast 3000, where the future is in the past.
So I'd say, ironically, this was a very solid episode.
Yeah, I think this one definitely is more comedic than last one.
Yeah, this episode runs a lot. It's a very quick episode, a very fast-paced episode, which this wasn't one of my favorites. I mean, it was the episode itself was fine, but I guess maybe coming off of the previous one, it didn't quite have the same. It was a much smaller episode, I suppose. There's much smaller stakes to it.
Well, not quite, considering the stakes here are, Fry's life.
True. But you don't have I don't think you really see much of the Trisolians in later episodes, so I guess there isn't too much that happens in this that really has more wider things to the world than the rest of the series.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I don't think they ever appear again.
And you have the introduction of the Neptunians, which are great, like Elzar.
Yeah, Elzar is fun. And I also think this is the first time that we've heard Bender's cooking hobby mentioned.
Yeah, I like cooking.
Which, there's some great jokes related to that, like Elzar's line about separate the yolk from your genetically enhanced eggplant. There's so many layers to that.
And there's a really kind of a throwaway where he says to set the oven to 3,500 degrees.
And then, of course, you have Bender salting the slug so hard it deflates.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, would happen with a slug. I love the line from Fry. It's like, that's the saltiest thing I've ever eaten. Once I ate a big heaping bowl of salt. I've actually used that line before.
And of course, Bender's saying the salt content was 10% under a lethal dose to defend his food. Because, like, of course that's how a robot would think about food.
Right, exactly. There was a robot pizza guy in the last episode.
This is true. Although I feel that was probably a robot made to serve pizza, not so much Bender, who, you know...
He was a bending unit.
Yeah.
Programmed with the recipes.
Although, even beyond, like, the cooking jokes, there were a lot of really good jokes in this episode. Like, the whole cold open with Bender going to the robot wash, and of course it's set to the song. And, like, at the end, he gets that air freshener pendant, which, nice little touch. Then, of course, it immediately rains.
Yeah, there's good visual gags in it, but honestly, I really don't like that song. I don't think I've ever liked that song.
I mean, I've never been hot on it either, but it's a good scene. It's a good joke.
I feel like it goes on a little long. It's not even particularly long. I remember it going on longer originally, but I just think it could have been done easier. I don't know. I'm just not a fan of I like the visual gags in it, but just the setup itself, I don't know how I feel about it.
Did you notice that as Hermes is talking to Bender, there's that little lit up sign outside his office, chewing out in progress?
Yeah, that was great.
And of course, you know things are gonna be funny when you see, they're gonna comment it when you see Leela wearing a different colored tank top than she normally does.
Yeah, he makes fun of her lime green tank top, but it feels a little awkward to just randomly change a character's outfit for the sake of a single joke.
It's like when you see them wearing a watch, they're going to be checking their watch.
Yeah, it kind of highlights, the fact that these character designs really don't change from episode to episode, and they're always wearing the same thing. Which, to be fair, you can get some good jokes out of that. Like, I think SpongeBob once had a joke where he opens his closet and it's just the exact same outfit that he always wears a dozen times.
Which is a pretty common joke to show in a lot of cartoons. Just kind of bringing light to that sort of thing.
Yeah, Applejack's closet full of hats.
I'm the odd one out here. I haven't really seen much of My Little Pony, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, it's kind of common in a lot of cartoons, and in fact, there were people like Einstein that wore the exact same suit every day.
Yes. There were also a lot of really great background gags, like the all-tentacle massage sign, the head shop selling actual heads in jars instead of, drugs.
Right.
And then you have Bender's cooking apron, which says, "To serve man," and that's a really great Twilight Zone episode.
Which, it's a good episode, but it really all seems to hinge on the pun. Which, I love puns, but it seems like a lot of build-up for just that.
I mean, didn't The Simpsons make fun of it with that One Treehouse of Horror section?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like how to cook for 40 humans, and like they keep pushing off more of the dust on it. But there's a couple of more great background gags, like when he actually gets to the Trisolian throne, you can see all the signs. In one of them, like written in the, I want to say galactic alphabet, but that's something different. But like the alphabet cipher that was made up for the series, it actually says "Don't drink the Emperor."
That's a nice touch.
Like on the one that goes right above where they put the one in English. So
yeah, you could, through context clues, you can guess that they say the same thing as the English one. But it's cool that they actually made up a language that translates to it.
It's not a translation, it's just a cipher. It's like each language is each symbol is a different letter. And if you can read that, then there's all kinds of stuff all over. Like there's one on the open sign that I'm pretty sure just says open underneath it.
Yeah, it's something they use a lot in background gags throughout the series, often hiding extra little jokes. I've never really bothered translating them just because it seems like a ton of work for a small joke.
Of course.
But, I appreciate that they put those there for the people who do want to put in the effort.
Or people who have it on DVD, or they want to see all the sight gags in the background. And oftentimes they're really not honestly worth it. They're just kind of stuff you could kind of read from. Because like if you were doing something like that, you wouldn't put your A game into writing jokes that not as many people would get. Because you would have to put that effort into kind of reading them.
Well, unless your Gravity Falls and you want to put a ton of ciphers into the show that foreshadow later episodes. But
true.
That whole show is built around ciphers.
Yeah, which I do enjoy. I finished the first season a couple days ago.
I also really liked the joke of the Z-ray eye and the merchant just saying, it's better, it's 2 more than X.
Yeah, you have the shady deal. Honestly, all the stuff leading up to the stuff on Trisol I thought was way better than the stuff that actually hits Trisol, because then it just kind of slows down. You just kind of have Fry just chilling out as the Emperor, nothing really big happening.
I guess.
Yeah, like Bender's whole cooking drama stuff. The plot with Bender cooking, it's kind of half-baked and just dropped off.
Which they revisit later, of course.
Yeah, it's kind of a major character thing that they do bring up in a bunch of later episodes. Although, with the subject of the black market organs dealer, this really does demonstrate how, like what I said last time about Fry continuing to get stupider, because like he lies down on this table so they can remove his lungs, and then he complains when Leela saves him.
Yeah, that is much more heavily the like you were saying, the Flanderization of Fry, whereas like he would not be this. He would be this dumb, but he wouldn't have this lack of sense of self-preservation.
Yeah, how is he alive if he's this stupid? Like, it's really bizarre that we're hitting this level of Flanderization this early in the show's run.
Well, he does mention that it's not that he's stupid; it's that he doesn't think things out, and that's why he's in the 31st century to begin with. The fact that he didn't think things out and how he ended up trapped in that freezer.
But there's still, like, I can't think of the word. There's a limit to this sort of thing.
Yeah.
You can only go so far with having no foresight.
Though I do like how the professor sending them on dangerous missions all the time is so predictable that even Bender is wise to it by now, just being like, here it comes, and then when he says it, thank you and good night.
Good news, everybody. Oh, this can't be good.
And then, of course, Leela's just like, are we even allowed in the Forbidden Zone? And the professor's just like, oh, it's just a name like the Death Zone or the Zone of No Return. I love that joke.
Everything's named like that in the Galaxy of Terror.
Yeah.
Which I believe was a sci-fi movie.
Was it?
I wouldn't be surprised. There's one called Galaxy of Terror.
I'm going to look that up now. One sec. Let me open Wikipedia. Galaxy of Terror, 1981 horror sci-fi film produced by Roger Corman.
There you go.
You're right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if this entire episode was inspired by that joke from Douglas Adams, where it mentions something as uncomfortably like being drunk. And you say, what's wrong with being drunk? Do you ask a glass of water?
I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised if this episode was entirely inspired by that, because that literally is. Like, half of these emperors were drunk at their own coronations. Like, I plan on being drunk at my own coronation, too.
Honestly, the Trisolians crowning each emperor's assassin as the new emperor is just inherently funny, because why would you structure your society this way?
Well, somebody has to run the country.
But yeah, like the fact that the average length of a Trisolian emperor's reign is 1 week, and Leela comments that half of them are drunk at their own coronation, like, how do they all have royal portraits then? Because a proper painted portrait can take over a month to make.
Well, maybe it's the future, so they're able to produce it much faster.
I guess it's just like, these are the kinds of things that my brain notices, and I have to put down in my notes.
It would be really difficult to drink Fry, though. So he's Fry wasn't he Fry the Solid?
Yeah.
You'd think that the crew would get some sort of debriefing on the locals, so this sort of thing doesn't happen.
Yeah, you'd think that, but apparently not.
You could tell the professor doesn't care about that.
True, but still.
Honestly, it may just be because I'm not Trisolian, but Florg's satire went completely over my head. But I suppose that's the joke. Although I did like the Trisolian musicians playing glasses with themselves in them.
I thought that was actually really clever, because you could definitely see that sort of thing working with this society. If they are made of water or they are made of this liquid, then yeah, that would sort of become its own instrument where you just adjust the frequency based on how much of yourself is in there. So that actually seems like a really logical step in that direction.
So, with the assassinations are all through, drinking the previous emperor, but is that a common thing outside of the royal line? Are they just, I guess, cannibals?
Are they constantly drinking just like commoners?
Yeah, like, is drinking each other a normal practice?
That's a very good question, and I don't think they ever addressed that. So what do you all think about Fry's story of the grasshopper and the octopus?
I have heard the actual story, and it's just way off.
I think this is my favorite joke of the episode, honestly. Just Fry telling this nonsense story from a half-remembered fable, and it has nothing to do with anything and goes nowhere.
Yeah, the main crux of this episode is really just Fry's relationship with Leela, and the fact that he does care about her, the fact that her dying is kind of what sets him off to break his macho attitude, which is preventing him from crying to begin with.
Yeah, that whole Fry can't cry because he's too macho thing, I don't think they were really going for an intentional condemnation of toxic masculinity, but it's kind of hard to read it any other way.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you're in a really good mood, yeah, it is really hard to cry. It's not the fact that he's macho, it's the fact that he's in such a good place. Like, he's the emperor, he has thousands of Trisolians at his command, he can do anything he wants. There's no reason for him to cry.
I suppose. It's also worth pointing out his just blasé reaction to the reminder that all of his old friends and family are long dead. You know, we're still at the beginning of his long, subtle character arc.
Yeah, typically especially since we're coming off of, just episode 6, where he's so caught up in the past, this is just such a stark difference between that.
You do sort of see this stuff. They don't have a strict continuity. It's obvious certain episodes take place after episodes, but they don't have such a strict continuity that things will immediately come into play in the next episode. Especially in terms of, like, character arc moments.
Yeah, but it's more character consistency, than stories.
I suspect that, like, from the way the last episode was written, it was more that he missed the environment of the 20th century, not as much the people. But of course, this does change over the course of the show.
Which you could sort of chalk up to Fry changing over the course of the show as well.
I also like how the Imperial Oath is so long that it takes the entire afternoon to recite. That is also just an inherently funny thing.
And really the fact that the Oath is just how, like, all the previous emperors that were killed.
It gets longer and longer each time.
And then, of course, Bender punching Fry in the stomach to try to hit Bont. That's dumb, but it got an actual chuckle out of me.
I'm just a sucker for any sort of bioluminescent creature, so when the sun's set and what are they called?
The Trisolians.
The Trisolians start glowing. It's just really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was because they had to come up with something for their nocturnal phase, which, I mean, they don't really change other than they start glowing, but that's how they're able to see Emperor Bont now.
Yeah, I feel that that's the entire reason they came up with that idea, just to have that sudden twist that, oh hey, Bont's still alive.
See, I mean, it's a decently written episode, I just don't think that it's one of the more important ones in the grand scheme of the series.
That's entirely fair.
Yeah, it's just generally fun playing around with the sci-fi themes.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you compare it to X-Files as like the Monster of the Week episode, which I guess you could say because they often give them that's the impetus. You have to deliver this to this planet, and hijinks ensue.
Although I do think this was the first background appearance of the Number 9 man who would play a central role in the 4th movie. Although I noticed he wasn't wearing his tinfoil hat here. Maybe he hadn't developed his psychic powers yet at this point? Also, did you guys notice Zoidberg was really funny in this episode?
Well, any episode he's in, he tends to be pretty funny, but...
Yeah, but like this episode in particular, the whole, a fancy dress gala, I'll wear my formal shell, we're in hot butter here, or the whole centrifuge pit, where, I'll just spin you in a centrifuge, separate you from the Emperor, and Fry points out, won't that crush my bones? And Zoidberg's just like...
Oh, right, the bones.
Because he's got an exoskeleton.
Which, I mean, I don't think that would work if you had an exoskeleton either, but...
I also really like the Trisolians just ramming themselves into the door and doing barely anything because they're just water.
Yeah, I mean, of course, they... it really is kind of the joke that Trisolians really don't know what the hell they're doing. Their whole society is dumb. Their society is built on whoever assassinated the previous emperor, and they're trying to destroy a door by ramming into it when they're made of water. So what exactly are they trying to accomplish here?
Yeah, good question.
I'm surprised they don't evaporate.
Their big siege weapon is a giant juicer.
Yeah, why do they have that? You can't imagine they would encounter many solid creatures unless they're constantly getting aliens landing there. And even then, if they have a lot of visitors, how often would they have occasion to use that juicer?
These are the questions, and that's just why I guess that's part of what I didn't feel was so great about this episode, because it really does kind of feel like a throwaway episode that it has the jokes and everything, but it doesn't really add up to it all that much.
I suppose. And there are some issues I do kind of take with it, like the scene of Fry choosing his royal consort, and they're just in bottles, so he has to point sight unseen, and the high priest just oh, I wasn't aware your majesty was into that sort of thing, or hey, I'm not one to judge. It's I don't think that's particularly funny. It's honestly borderline uncomfortable, and it also just kind of comes and goes nowhere.
Yeah, well, the problem with that one is that you fill in the blanks yourself. It's well, what? And I think it's funnier when they do leave it up to the imagination. It's well, what was wrong with her? Was it that she was fat, or was it that she was made of a different type of fluid? What do these creatures consider to be taboo or fetishistic or just not really widely accepted? It's no, it's fine but to an outsider, it's just, well, whatever. And you do encounter this in a lot of communities. It's well, I'll do this one. It's no, okay. It's do it that way. It's oh, wait, no, I'll do this other way. It's there's a lot of subtext in these things that you just don't understand. And that's kind of what the joke is, that there's this subtext that Fry is just completely over his head with this sort of thing, but also that it doesn't really matter in the long run. So it's making fun of both sides of this debate, the people that obsess over these things and the people that go into these things not understanding it.
It's just the fact that they decided to make a joke about this topic and structure it that way. It does feel almost like they're objectifying in this way and judging.
Well, they are literally objects in bottles.
In context, yeah, but there is that subtext. Especially since, when you were talking about in the first place that your mind went was being fat, and, they're... You know what I mean? I'm having trouble figuring out how to word this without it being kind of angry or upset, but I don't know. I'm not a fan of this kind of, haha, this person is unattractive joke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It may not be that they're unattractive. It could be that they're considered different in some way from the other Trisolians. So, which would, I guess, be either that they're unattractive or they're just different, which could be equated as unattractive, but...
The whole thing is, we don't know. You come to your own conclusions, and those conclusions aren't always great.
Yeah, and the fact that it is that you think the problem may be that they're unattractive, where it could be something completely different from that. And you look at, we had mentioned Twilight Zone before, you think about the episode Eye of the Beholder, where, again, attractiveness is in the eye of the beholder. What do they really look like?
That's a fair point, and just, you get what I'm saying, though, right?
Yeah, of course. The fact that they're trying to do this sort of joke just entirely, whereas my argument is well, it's only that way because of one's interpretation of the joke. If the joke is interpreted another way, it may not necessarily be intended to be offensive in this other particular way.
But I guess just because how much women are objectified in our own society, how much, they have to, rely on their appearances to get through life. You just can't help but make those conclusions. In their
defense, I don't think they ever specifically say that the Trisolians are male or female, or that the consuls, or that the royal consul or concubine, or whatever term they use, or that they do go one way or the other.
Well, given the general writing of this show and the environment of the time, you kind of have to assume that they are.
Also, harem does refer to women.
Yeah, and also this whole scene is immediately followed by that joke of Amy soaking her hand in a Trisolian by mistake, and he just comments, "You touched me in ways I've never been touched before," and that is also pretty gross.
Yeah.
Like, thankfully both of these jokes are over with really quickly. Neither of them stays for too long, but they definitely do bother me. And then of course there's the episode's title, which is a reference to the 1960s sitcom My Three Sons, but the sitcom really has nothing to do with the episode. So in contrast to something like Fear of a Bot Planet, where the pun that it was, the pun that it was making was actually relevant to the themes they were touching on, here it's just like, it's a thing. It's just, here's a reference to something that has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, again, it's something that I tend to refer to called reference degradation, where if something is not everything can be a reference to something else, because otherwise you're going to run out of things to reference. So if you want to name a title of something that you're working on based on like either a pun or a play on words to another existing phrase, it doesn't even have to be like a published work, it just like an existing phrase, eventually you're going to have to, you're going to run out of stuff to reference eventually. So I always try to balance it. It's something that admittedly I probably do think about way too much. But if I am ever giving something a title or giving something like a name, I try to even it out at least a ratio of 1-to-1 with like original titles and titles that are references to something else.
Well, at least we're not like, the Pokemon anime dub where every single episode title has to be a pun based on a song or something.
Right. Because, like, eventually you run out of things to reference. But then, of course, people are referencing other things. And I saw this posted on Wikipedia a while back where, oh God, what was it? There was a phrase that someone says in this game or a movie. They say there can be only one, and which is obviously a reference to Highlander. But then in like the Wikipedia entry for that episode or that event, it says that it's either a reference to Highlander or it's a reference to Team Fortress 2, where the demo man says there can be only one.
Which itself is obviously a reference to Highlander.
Is obviously a reference to Highlander, so that's reference degradation in a nutshell. It's like eventually you're going to run out of things to refer to, and everything's going to be a reference to something else.
I didn't even know the origin.
To make an obvious reference, it's a Xerox of a Xerox.
Right, exactly.
I do want to end us off on at least one more really good joke that I really liked, which was Bender just saying, "I'm not giving my name to a machine." He is a machine!
And as a machine, he should know how sus they can be.
That's fair.
Especially Bender. He is shady as fuck.
I don't like you and you don't like me. It's like, yeah, I like you. It's like, what do you like most about me? Which is, it reminds me of that scene in The Simpsons where, like, Moe tries to make a truce with Lisa, and he's like, "Look, Lisa, I don't like you and you don't like me." And it's like, "You don't like me? I like you." Like,
Aww.
Which is, like, such a Lisa thing to say. It's like, she has no problem with Moe. She likes Moe. She likes everybody, unless they give it a reason not to. So, yeah, I guess that will do it for this episode. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, this was definitely not the best episode, but it was still pretty decent. It was definitely overall, there were some fantastic jokes.
Yeah, the humor in this episode is really good, but like I said, it doesn't really seem to have all that much to do with the series at large, just in terms of ongoing concepts.
And that's okay.
I mean, that's the thing. Not every episode needs to have some grand importance to an ongoing storyline to be good.
True, of course.
And even then, we still have Bender's cooking that will come up later.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is season 1. We're still setting up the seeds for these characters to follow up on.
Thank you for listening to Space Podcast 3000. Your 3 voices of the future are Nova Altman, Doug Hancox, and Eden Valerie. The theme music is Voxel Revolution by Kevin MacLeod, licensed from filmmusic.io. Find it and hundreds of other free songs at incompetech.filmmusic.io. You can hear more episodes of Space Podcast 3000 on YouTube or at soundcloud.com/spacepod3k. Follow us on Twitter at spacepod3k. Be sure to join us next time as the Planet Express crew save New York from a big piece of garbage.